Hello everyone, and welcome back. Before we get into tonight's stories, I'd love to know where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. Leave both in the comments below. I always enjoy seeing just how far these stories are traveling and who's listening from around the world. It also really helps support the channel and lets me know that you're enjoying these videos. Now, turn down the lights, get comfortable, and let's get into tonight's stories. I grew up in a tiny town deep in the Appalachian Mountains, so small it never had its own hospital, because the diner in the middle of town did double duty as pretty much everything the community needed. The man who owned it was also the closest thing we had to a doctor, and he ran both jobs out of the same building without much separating one from the other. He kept a locked cabinet behind the register stocked with basic medical supplies, gauze, splints, a few bottles of things I never asked too many questions about. And he would just step out from behind the grill mid-shift if somebody came in bleeding or running a fever bad enough to need looking at. You could sit down at the counter for a plate of eggs and find out the guy next to you was actually there for a tetanus shot instead of breakfast, and there was no real way to tell just by looking at him. Nobody in town thought this was odd. It was just how things worked when the nearest actual hospital was over an hour away on roads that turned to ice half the winter. The school I went to was the smallest public school in the state, kindergarten through 12th grade under one roof, with a graduating class most years running somewhere around 40 kids, not all of whom even lived in town. Some got bussed in from even smaller spots further back in the mountains. My senior year, we did one of those family tree projects for a history class, everybody pinning up handmade charts along the back wall of the classroom, and somewhere in the middle of comparing notes with each other, we figured out almost the whole senior class was related in some way, not distantly either, closer to third cousins in most cases once you traced it back far enough. We still had prom that year, same as always, and nobody in town seemed to think that was strange. It was just what happened when a place stayed that small and that closed off for that many generations. This all matters because of what happened the winter. I turned 16, out at a property that belonged to a woman about 45 minutes away by mountain roads, though close enough as the crow flies that you could sometimes see her porch light from certain spots on our own land once the trees went bare for winter. My mother had gotten friendly with her over the past year or so, an older widow who had just gotten her house wired for electricity that year, which was late even by our standards, considering this was the mid-90s by that point. Because of the new wiring, she did not need her old wood-fired cooking range anymore, and she offered it to my mother one afternoon over the phone, who took her up on it right away since ours had been on its last legs for longer than either of us wanted to admit. My father and I drove out to get it on a Saturday afternoon that December, the sky already that flat gray color it gets right before snow, taking the long mountain roads that curved back on themselves so many times, the actual distance felt twice as far as it really was. My father had the radio on low, mostly static, broken up by a country station that kept fading in and out depending on which side of the mountain we were on. Her house sat at the end of a long gravel drive, woods pressing in close on three sides, which was normal enough for how we lived out there, but this felt more remote than most places I had been, even growing up somewhere as isolated as we did. She was a pleasant woman, thin, with white hair pulled back tight, and she invited us in for coffee before we loaded up the range. Insisting on it in that way, older women out there always seemed to insist on things, like refusing would somehow be rude in a way you could not quite explain. We sat at her kitchen table waiting on the coffee to finish, and I noticed a row of old photographs hanging on the wall behind her that I kept looking back at the whole time we were there. Family portraits, going back what looked like decades based on the clothes and how faded the prints were, some of them so old the edges had curled up under the glass. Every single one of them, as far back as I could tell squinting from across the table, showed the same house in the background, same porch railing, same tree line behind it. unchanged across what had to be 60 or 70 years worth of pictures. I asked her about it, mostly just making conversation, while my father sipped his coffee and nodded along. And she told me the house had been in her family since it was built, never sold, never sat empty for more than a season at most, passed straight down through relatives for as long as anyone in her family could remember. She said it with a kind of pride, given how much history was clearly wrapped up in that one piece of land, but there was something about the way she said it, a flatness underneath the pride, like she was reciting a fact she had long since stopped having any real feelings about one way or the other. My father asked her a few polite questions about the range itself, how old it was, whether it needed any particular kind of wood, and she answered easily enough, standing up at one point to show him a dent along the side where her late husband had apparently dropped it, moving it in decades earlier. We finished the coffee, and my father and I loaded the range into the back of his truck, which took longer than expected since the thing was heavier than either of us anticipated, cast iron all the way through. She walked us out to say goodbye once it was secured, standing on her porch in a thin cardigan despite the cold, waving as we pulled off down that long gravel drive. It was already getting dark by the time we made it back to the main mountain road, winter days being short out there, and my father wanted to get most of the drive behind us before it went full dark. Given how many blind curves that road had, tight switchbacks with nothing but a low guardrail or sometimes nothing at all separating the shoulder from a drop-off into the trees below. About 20 minutes into the drive back, we came around one of those curves, and my father hit the brakes hard enough that the range shifted in the truck bed behind us with a heavy metallic scrape, because standing in the middle of the road, facing our headlights, was a woman. She did not move out of the way. She just stood there, arms hanging at her sides, staring straight into our headlights the way an animal freezes instead of how a person usually reacts. My father laid on the horn, long and hard, and she still did not move, did not flinch, did not put a hand up to shield her eyes from the glare, which is what anybody would do standing that close to bright headlights in the pitch dark. We sat there a few seconds just looking at her through the windshield, engine idling, my father's hand still pressed against the horn a second longer than it needed to be, and then he told me to lock my door, which I did without needing to hear it twice. I got a decent enough look at her in that stretch of time. She was not dressed for the cold, no jacket that I could see, just a plain dress that looked wrong for the season, and her hair was down and messy in a way that did not match how neatly the widow we had just left kept hers. I could not make out much of her face at that distance, just enough to tell she was looking directly at the truck, unmoving, unbothered by the cold or the horn or anything else about the situation that should have prompted some kind of reaction out of a normal person standing alone on a mountain road after dark. Eventually, she stepped off to the side of the road, slow, never taking her eyes off the truck the whole time she moved, and my father eased forward carefully, giving her as much room as the narrow road would let him, gravel crunching under the tires as he hugged the far edge of the lane. As we passed her, I turned around in my seat and looked out the back window, and she had already turned her head to keep watching us, standing right at the edge of the tree line now, not moving beyond that one turn of her neck, just watching our taillights the same way she had watched our headlights coming toward her. Neither of us said much the rest of the way home. My father kept both hands tight on the wheel, checking his mirrors more than usual, and I kept twisting around every so often to check the road behind us, even though there was nothing back there to see once we cleared the next curve. When we finally pulled into our own driveway and got inside, my mother was in the kitchen finishing up dinner, and she asked right away how the pickup had gone, expecting to hear about the range and nothing more. My father told her, and none of us really knew what to do with that beyond sitting there in the sudden quiet that followed. My father set the new range up against the far wall that same night, fitting it into the space where our old one used to sit, and none of us brought the woman on the road up again for the rest of that evening. This would have been one of the first times I was ever left home alone overnight, somewhere around 14 years old enough that my parents figured I could handle it, but still young enough that I remember being a little proud of myself just for being trusted with it. My mom had gone to help my grandmother recover from a hip surgery a few states over, and my dad had a work trip land on the same week, which meant for 4 nights I had the house entirely to myself. We lived out in rural Indiana, the kind of place where the nearest real town was a 20-minute drive, and the actual stretch of road we lived on had maybe a dozen houses total, spaced far enough apart that you could not see your neighbor's windows lit up at night, even though technically they were close by. Cornfields ran behind our property and continued for what felt like forever once you got past the thin line of trees at the edge of our yard. There was a small country church across the road from us, one of those tiny congregations that maybe pulled in 30 people on a good Sunday, and elderly neighbors on both sides of us who had lived there longer than I had been alive. Our lawns were big, close to an acre each, with maybe 70 or 80 feet separating our house from the neighbors on either side. We shared a driveway with the family to our right, and since my parents always left both cars parked out front regardless of whether anyone was actually home, there was nothing about our driveway that would have told a stranger the house was empty of adults that week. I was sleeping in my parents' room that first night, mostly because their bed was more comfortable than mine and they had a small television in there I liked to fall asleep to. Their bed sat right next to a window on the side of the house, and outside that window ran a thick strip of overgrown shrubs and ivy that had been creeping up the siding for years, the kind of greenery that was not impossible to walk through but would have taken some effort and would have definitely made noise doing it. I do not know for certain if I was already awake or if the sound is what pulled me out of sleep, but at some point deep into that first night, with every light in the house off, I became aware of whistling coming from just outside that window. It was not a song I recognized, but it was not just random tuneless noise either. It had a real melody to it, almost pleasant in a strange way, rising and falling like someone who actually knew how to whistle properly rather than just messing around. What struck me even at the time, young as I was that I could hear the whistling moving, slowly, back and forth along that side of the house, like whoever was doing it was pacing beneath the window. What I did not hear was footsteps, or snapping branches, or the sound of ivy and shrub leaves getting pushed aside, which should have been unavoidable given how thick that growth was along that entire side of the house. I lay there completely still, straining to hear anything besides the whistling itself, and there was nothing else. No footfalls on the dirt, no rustling, just that same slow, deliberate melody drifting back and forth outside the glass for what felt like several minutes, though I could not tell you exactly how long since time does strange things when you are that scared. Eventually, the whistling started moving away from the window, drifting toward the front of the house in the direction of the road, growing fainter with each passing few seconds until I could not hear it at all anymore. I did not wait around to see if it would come back. I got up, ran through the house checking that every door was locked, which in a place like ours was not something we normally bothered with, grabbed the biggest knife I could find in the kitchen block, and got back into bed with the covers pulled up, knife gripped in one hand, listening for any sound at all until the sky outside finally started turning gray with early morning light. I need to explain something about where we lived, because the strangeness of this only really lands if you understand the kind of place it was. This was not a suburb. It was not even really a town in any meaningful sense, just a stretch of road with a scattering of houses on it, maybe 100 people total if you counted every single resident along the whole road. People did not wander through other people's yards out there at night, not for any innocent reason anyway, and if they did, there was a real chance they would end up getting shot at, because that was simply the kind of area it was. Behind our house, the direction that whistling had come from was a thin patch of trees, and behind that, cornfields that stretched out for miles without another house in sight. We never locked our doors normally, Not once that I could remember except for a single week-long vacation years earlier. That tells you something about how safe that place genuinely was, or was supposed to be. I went on to spend plenty more nights alone in that house over the following years, through the rest of my teenage years actually, and nothing like that ever happened again. I had other strange memories from earlier childhood, sure, the kind of things kids convince themselves they saw or heard, shapes in the dark that turned out to be nothing, sounds that were probably just the house settling. Those I have always been able to write off easily enough as an overactive imagination doing what kids' imaginations do. This one was different. I was old enough by then that the line between real and imagined had solidified pretty firmly in my head, and I knew what I heard. Even at 14, some part of me wanted to believe there was a simple explanation. A neighbor out walking late at night for some reason of their own. Maybe someone dealing with insomnia who liked to whistle to keep themselves company. Someone lost, maybe, cutting through yards trying to find their way back to the main road after their car broke down somewhere nearby. I turned over every version of a normal explanation I could think of, both that night and plenty of time since, trying to land on something that actually accounted for everything: the melody, the movement, and most of all, the complete absence of any sound that should have come with someone walking through that much overgrown brush in the pitch dark. I never did find one that fit all of it. A person walking through thick ivy and shrubs, even someone being careful, makes noise. Leaves rustle, branches catch on clothing and snap back. Feet find uneven ground and shift their weight in ways you can hear if you are listening closely enough. And I was listening as closely as I have ever listened to anything in my life that night. There should have been something besides that whistling. There was not. I never told my parents what happened. Not really. Not in any detail beyond mentioning once, weeks later, that I thought I heard someone outside one night while they were gone, which they brushed off the way parents do when a kid brings up something vague and unprovable after the fact. I did not push it further. Some part of me did not want to relive describing it out loud in full detail, and some other part of me, if I am being honest, did not want to hear them come up with a rational explanation either, because I think I already knew there was not going to be one that actually satisfied me. I still think about it sometimes, usually on quiet nights when I am home alone somewhere and everything outside goes still in that particular way rural areas go still after dark. I tell myself, the same way I told myself back then, that there has to be some ordinary explanation for a grown adult whistling a pretty unfamiliar tune outside the window of a dark farmhouse at 2 a.m, walking slowly back and forth through brush that somehow never made a single sound beneath their feet. There has to be, right? I had lived in Chicago my whole adult life until my hospital network transferred me to a small critical access facility out in rural Nebraska. One of those tiny hospitals that serves an entire county because the nearest real medical center is over an hour away. I fought the transfer for weeks, tried arguing I could handle the administrative work remotely, but my director wanted someone physically present to help rebuild the nursing schedule and train new staff. Eventually, I gave up fighting it. Staying meant a demotion and a pay cut, so I packed up my apartment and drove out to a town I had never even heard of before that phone call. The rent out there was almost nothing compared to what I had been paying, which meant I could afford an actual house with a yard for the first time in my life, and the drive to work took 4 minutes instead of the 45 I was used to fighting through downtown traffic. My new street was quiet in a way my old apartment never was. No sirens, no honking, no upstairs neighbors stomping around at 2 a.m. I told myself this could genuinely be a good change, and for the first hour after I finished unloading my car, I actually believed it. That first hour ended the moment my doorbell rang. A man stood on my porch, hair combed neat, glasses pushed up on his nose, wearing a button-down shirt that looked ironed even though it was a Saturday. "Hi there, I'm Walter. Live right across the street." He smiled wide enough that it looked like it might hurt. "You'd be Rachel, right?" I had not told anyone in this town my name yet. I asked him how he knew it, and he laughed like the question was cute. Small town, news travels fast around here. When I got a speeding ticket last spring, my neighbors knew about it before I did. He said this like it was a charming fact about the place, rather than something a little unsettling. We talked for a minute, and he mentioned his wife baked and would probably bring something over later as a welcome gift, which I tried to politely decline before he waved at a woman walking a dog down the sidewalk. "Afternoon, Renee," he called out. She waved back, then turned to me with the same bright, immediate friendliness Walter had shown, like she already knew exactly who I was and had been expecting me. She introduced herself, mentioned she ran a book club a few houses down, said she would stop by properly once I got settled, and let her dog pull her along down the street before I could say much back. Walter chatted a little longer, told me to call him if I needed anything, and I finally excused myself to keep unpacking, closing the door on his still smiling face. I napped for a couple hours, exhausted from the drive, and when I woke up I decided to walk around the neighborhood since I did not have orientation at the hospital until Monday. I locked my door and had barely made it down my front steps when an older woman appeared from the sidewalk holding a plastic container. "Hello there, dear." She smiled the same way Walter and Renee had, that same immediate warmth that felt slightly too immediate. "I made you cookies. I'm Pauline." I thanked her, opened the container in front of her out of politeness, and found they were some odd herbal flavor I did not recognize, not sweet the way I expected. I ate one anyway and told her they were wonderful. She patted my wrist, told me to bring the container back once I was done, mentioned she had given away dozens of these containers over the years and rarely got any returned, and headed off down the street toward her own house. I got in my car afterward to drive around and get a feel for the layout of the town, and about a quarter-mile down the road I noticed a tall metal structure sitting on a hill to my left, some kind of old fire lookout tower with a small platform near the top and what looked like an antenna mounted above that. I did not think much of it. Small towns like this often had old infrastructure nobody bothered tearing down. Orientation at the hospital that Monday went fine, nothing unusual. Staff friendly enough in a normal, professional way that felt different from the almost aggressive friendliness I had gotten from my neighbors. I stayed a little later than planned, going over scheduling software, and by the time I left it was already dark, close to 8 in the evening. I decided to walk the few blocks to the small grocery store instead of driving, wanting something quick for dinner. On the way there, I ran into Walter and a woman he introduced as his wife, Diane. "How was your first day?" Walter asked, that same wide grin locked in place. "We haven't had anyone new move in around here in years." Diane smiled along with him, said something about how peaceful the town was compared to a city, how nobody who moved here ever seemed to want to leave once they experienced it. A man jogging past waved and called out a quick hello as he passed us, disappearing down the block. I noticed Renee come out of her house behind them, carrying a trash bag toward the curb. She waved. I waved back. Then I noticed the tower again. Further down the road, that same lookout structure from earlier, except now there was a small red light blinking steadily near the top, the kind you would expect on any tall structure to warn low-flying aircraft. "Hey, what's the deal with that tower?" I asked, turning back toward Walter. "Is it some kind of old fire watch station?" Walter did not answer. I glanced over, and both he and Diane had stopped smiling entirely, staring past my shoulder with expressions that had gone completely flat, eyes wide but unfocused in a way that made the hair on my arms stand up. "Walter?" I said. Neither of them responded. I turned to see what they were looking at, and my chest tightened immediately. The jogger who had passed us moments earlier was standing dead center in the street now, not moving, facing away from all of us in the exact same direction Walter and Diane were staring. An older man sitting on a porch a few houses down had also gone still, his head turned the same direction as everyone else. I looked back at Walter and Diane, and past them I could see Renee still standing by her trash can, frozen mid-motion, holding the bag but not moving to drop it in, staring in that same fixed direction as everyone else on the street. My heart was hammering hard enough I could feel it in my throat. I took a slow step backward, trying not to draw attention, though I could not have told you what I thought would happen if I did. My hand was shaking enough that my car keys slipped out of my grip and hit the pavement with a sharp, loud clatter. Every single one of them turned toward that sound at once. Not their whole bodies, just their heads, snapping in my direction in perfect unison, and I stood there frozen, staring back at expressions that had not blinked once since I first noticed something was wrong. Their eyes stayed locked on me as I kept backing up slowly, necks twisting further than should have been comfortable to track my movement while their feet stayed planted exactly where they had been. I could not hold their stares anymore, so I dropped my eyes to the pavement and kept moving backward, one careful step at a time, waiting for anything, a sound, a movement, something to break whatever was happening. For instance, you can find every kind of big box store in a city that we just don't have out here, Walter said suddenly, his voice completely normal, mid-sentence like nothing had interrupted him at all. I looked up and he was smiling again, animated, talking to Diane like the last 30 seconds had not happened. I glanced past them and saw Renee dropping her trash bag into the can and heading back toward her front door, unbothered, as if she had been doing exactly that the entire time. I spun around fully and saw the jogger running again, continuing down the street in the direction he had originally been headed. The old man who had been sitting on his porch was simply gone. No sign of him or the chair he had been sitting in moments before. "You all right, Rachel?" Walter asked, tilting his head at me with what looked like genuine concern now. I did not have an answer that made any sense, so I just stared at him, sweat gathering along my hairline despite the cool evening air. "You've had a long day," Diane said gently. "Probably just tired from the move. You should get some rest." "We need to go pick up our kids from practice," Walter added, giving my shoulder a light pat before he and Diane continued down the sidewalk, waving over their shoulders like nothing at all had just occurred. I stood there another minute, alone on the sidewalk, before I finally looked back toward the tower on the hill. The red light had stopped blinking.